Welcome back, everyone. POW Ponder Weather here. Happy Friday out there. In this update, we're going to be walking you through the extended range through the month of March to see what's happening going forward. So let's start off with the overall setup this morning. You can actually see these ridging of high pressure really starting to build over portions of Alaska as well as into Greenland. Whenever you start to see these positives starting to build over the top, that helps lower the pressures underneath, and we do have a significant trough really diving into the Pacific Northwest. That'll push down into portions of California, then elongate across the upper north central plains region into the upper Midwest, as well as extending eventually into the Northeast with some snow. And then the southern subtropical jet will be alive and active along a frontal boundary down here in portions of the southern plains. Look at the setup for today. So you got that northern side of the polar jet activating that snow across the portions of the Dakotas through Minnesota, as well as into Wisconsin, into Michigan, and then lighter amounts extending as you extend into portions of the Northeast. There's the atmospheric river event coming back into play for California with some heavier rains, moderate excessive rainfall in these areas with easily 1 to 2 inches, if not 3 inches, just for today alone. There's that frontal boundary extending all the way down in the southern plains, and within this frontal boundary, that's where we have to be concerned about some showers and some isolated thunderstorms within this region. But as we get into the day tomorrow, going into your Saturday time frame, there's the heavier snows breaking out across portions of the Dakotas through Wisconsin. There's the southern branch. That cold front lifts back up as a warm front. Temperatures rapidly surge across portions of Texas. On the east side of there, we have to be concerned about some stronger storms could be breaking out with some larger hail type producers and within this zone of eastern Oklahoma. Get it into Little Rock. These areas that's been extremely active as of late, and there's that boundary with more rain going to be entering portions of the West Coast as the rain will start to shift even further south into California and eventually start creeping all the way down into portions of Southern California. But there's the overall breakdown between now and Saturday morning with the snow amount. So all these areas in these blue shaded areas across portions of Wisconsin, northeastern Iowa, as well as into northern Illinois, some of these areas could easily pick up pretty common amounts of 6 to 8 inches of snowfall within this sector as we move through all the way through Saturday morning around 6 o'clock in the morning. And then lighter amounts as you extend up here into portions of the Northeast. But either way, we've got 4 to 6 inches in these blue shaded areas, and all the yellow shaded areas, we've got possibly 6 to 8 inches of snow, and then some isolated pockets of 8 to 12 inches of snowfall. And that is just between now and Saturday morning. So if you are in the market for a weather station, I highly recommend the Tempest Weatherflow weather station. I've actually had it myself for about 3 years. I feel it's the best one on the market, but they also have a wind meter and a weather meter. So other than the Tempest, you can actually purchase one of these as the wind meters or a weather meter as well. I'll actually have a link in the description below as my discount code that offers a 10% discount and free shipping. So you can actually click on there and possibly order one for yourself. But going forward, we're going to be seeing a massive dip in the overall EPO. This is pretty significant as the teleconnections start to plunge, and that's an indication that colder air will shift all the way from Canada all the way into portions of the deep south, mainly into the southeast, but it rapidly rebounds. And that's also an indication we're going to be watching a lower area low pressure forming and start to ride up the coast of the eastern seaboard going forward by the early part of next week. And that's exactly what is happening. Here's take a look at some of the temperature anomalies. By the time we get into the 13th, we're starting to see the initial stages of the sudden stratospheric warming event, right? If you recall, which occurred all the way back on February the 16th. Now, these things usually take a couple of weeks to filter down through the mid latitudes and back into the US and showing up with those below average temperature anomalies. And we're starting to see the initial stages of that. And there's plenty of colder air for March standards, definitely on the way, that's trailing behind this one. But as we get into your Monday time frame, the 13th, we definitely have below average temperatures for a good part of the southeast. Some of these areas could be looking at a freeze as well, so you might have to be covering the plants, and that just extends into the Tuesday timeframe as well. That's something new as we start to see a little bit warmer conditions starting to build over portions of the west coast. That'll allow much of the central and eastern 2/3 of the US and eating away of that southeast ridge with those below average temperature anomalies. At the same time, that low pressure center that's going to be forming into the southern plains sometime on Monday is going to be sneaking up in portions of the Ohio Valley and eventually into the Northeast as these systems try to phase together. So here's the setup by Sunday. So we got the northern branch, the polar branch. They're bringing more snow into portions of Minnesota, back into Wisconsin again, into Michigan, and even portions of Ohio, while the southern branch has the rain, had the stronger storms on Saturday, and that will fishtail across portions of the southeast on Sunday. And then it tries to phase together with the northern branch, and as it phases together, it develops a pretty rapid, successful low pressure center off the east coast of the eastern seaboard, wrapping in that colder air as the teleconnections start to go negative, and that low pressure center comes up the coastline here. We could be looking at a fairly significant snowstorm up here into the Northeast as this really starts to get its act together. As the NAO starts to go negative, you have the 50-50 low will actually push this a little bit further inland as this slows down as well. So this could be a pretty significant snowstorm for this neck of the woods. You really haven't seen that much snow, so this isn't really saying much up there, as you're definitely getting a late start to winter. A lot of these areas, I don't need to tell you, are well below average snow amounts, but we're going to be making up for lost time because there's a pretty good snowstorm with this particular setup for Monday and Tuesday, but there's definitely a lot more snow on the table as colder air will continue to move in. So let's take a look at some of that colder air going forward. This is the overall temperature anomalies, the latest update from the ensemble guidance from the 14th through the 19th. That continues to bring the colder air into the eastern 2/3 of the US with well below average temperature anomalies, for March standards. So definitely could be looking at several more freezes definitely on the table, especially for portions of the southeast, getting in portions of the southeast. Here's another setup by the time we get into St. Patrick's Day, because we still have the cold air continue to move southbound as we have another significant system coming in out of Canada as the jet stream tries to dip again, and we have yet another system building back over here in portions of Texas with more rain for them. And again, as we take you through time through the 18th of the month, these actually try to phase together again, bringing more snow potentially back in the picture for portions of the Ohio Valley, getting back into the mid-Atlantic as well as into the Northeast again. It's like, where was this activity in the heart of winter, right back in January and February? Well, the pattern's changing. I mean, we're finally coming out of a La Nina. We're heading into an enso neutral, so things changed, and we had a late season sudden stratospheric warming event. So we've got cold air entering back in the picture, and normally we have higher amounts of precipitation as we get deeper into March. And with cold air in place, a lot of that is going to be in the form of snow. So that's what's happening. And then as we extend the view and through the 18th through the 23rd of the month, we can still see the ensemble's guidance still hinting at that cold air continue to win over in these sections, especially for the eastern, the central and eastern 2/3 of the US with those well below average temperature anomalies. That's pretty below average. A good 10 to 15 degrees below average overall 5-day average mean. So this is some pretty cold stuff for March standards through that 18th and the 23rd time frame. And it doesn't really end there, because looking at the latest guidance from the CFS daily through the end of the month, through that 25th and through the 30th of the month to end March, we still have those below average temperature anomalies, and we won't be seeing much of the southeast ridge beyond the 10th time frame. That's for sure, and also put a damper on a lot of the severe weather, I think, as well. So there's going to be isolated pockets of some marginal, and there might be some very isolated slight risk days. But I don't really see, with much of this cold air entering the picture, I don't really see March as a very active month on the severe weather front, because all this colder air is definitely going to be in place for an extended period of time. And if we take a look at the overall European weeklies, over a 30-day period. Now, this is a time frame from basically the middle of March all the way through the middle of April. And definitely you see that colder air on a 30-day average mean more or less extended over a good part of the West and good part of the East as well. The only exception I do feel is probably extreme portions of the Southwest and really kind of much of Texas, as you kind of get a glancing blow from this colder air. So these are the areas that potentially could be above average between those time periods. But for the majority of the US, it definitely appears you're going to be on the cooler side and the snowier side, as well as that cold air will continue to take over. Here's the latest GFS extended, kind of on the same page as the European weekly. So these extended global guidance is already hinting with the combination. We already had the sudden stratospheric warming event. We already know that occurred. So we had a spike up in the Arctic, and that cold air is coming out of the Arctic and filtering down through the mid latitudes and filtering down into the US. And that's exactly what's happening with this particular system. The last sudden stratospheric warming event was way back on like the first week of January in 2021. And the colder anomalies hit for a good part of the US in that first week or two in that February timeframe. So there's usually a 3 or 4 week lag with this cold air, and that's the same thing we're seeing again. And that cold air usually lasts for a couple of weeks after it enters the picture. So this is exactly the same thing that we're seeing. It's just it happened a lot later, and now this is filtering in through basically middle of March through the middle of April with those below average temperature anomalies. And with all that in place, and with the colder air, and with those above average precipitation that you just normally get in the spring months, spring is definitely going to be on hold, and winter tries to make a comeback. And a lot of these areas is basically making a comeback, and some of these areas that have seen a ton of snow, and a good part of the Dakotas and portions of Minnesota through Wisconsin will be probably looking at near record levels by the time we hit St. Paul area and to Minneapolis. Their all-time records is about almost 100 inches. You're probably going to be pretty close to that by the time we hit middle of April, that's for sure. With all the snows going to still be left on the table. But even in those areas and through the Ohio Valley, don't throw the towel in on winter yet, because there are signs that you still have plenty of more snow opportunities on the table, and especially into the Northeast as well, where you've had a lackluster winter so far, is going to be trying to make a comeback for those next 30 days, at least on the snow front. And here's the latest GFS extended, essentially applying the same thing on board with the European weeklies as well as the GFS extended, all implying there's plenty of snow on the table with this overall track that's going forward, starting essentially really from now all the way through possibly the middle of April, has some of the colder anomalies kind of locked in place for an extended period of time. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. I am going to be taking a little bit of a road trip after this with the family. It's a spring break for my kids, so I'll be gone and out of pocket for a couple days, but I'll definitely be back on Monday with a new update. So catch me then, and where I protect you before and after the storm.